mistakes while maintaining proven practices.
Dedicated.
Serving with integrity and professionalism. Elgin became an incorporated city in 1854 and installed its first police marshal, George W. Renwick. Over the years, the title of the head law enforcement officer changed from marshal to chief. And although the role has expanded, one duty has remained consistent: to ensure law and order for the citizens of Elgin.
It's time now for Fridays with the Finest, featuring Elgin's current police chief, Anna Lalley, on Elgin's hometown radio station since 1949, WRMN AM 1410 and 96.7 FM.
All right, it is Friday, and it's time for Fridays with the Finest. Been a active show here this morning, and the action continues as we welcome Badge 240 to the room on a Friday morning. Chief Anna Lalley, how you doing, Chief?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Good.
You seem like you're in a good chipper mood today.
I always am. Yep. Depends.
Always, but it depends.
Yes,
yeah.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, well, you're smiling today. That's a good thing. So, what's happening with you? It's been a pretty busy week. City council meeting and a lot going on. Anything happening in the Elgin crime world? Seemed pretty quiet this week.
Yes. So I wanted to just cover a couple things before I have my guests. I have two gentlemen who are in our traffic division, traffic detectives. So John Cox and Craig Tucker. They are going to be talking all things traffic today. So I know last week we were talking about traffic crashes and what happens during a traffic crash. And so, it's always nice to bring people who actually do the work on the show.
Yeah.
And they can give their expertise and talk a little bit about, how complex some of these cases are. And it's not as simple as, we show up, we make a determination, and then it's done. Sometimes these cases can take months to come to a conclusion. So, but before I talk about that, I just want to mention real quick, in terms of this, you had mentioned the council meeting, and I was listening to your show earlier, just briefly, about the council meeting and the civilian review board that occurred, the passage of an ordinance that occurred on Wednesday of this week.
Yeah.
So just so everybody has the right information, and I'll keep this short, and again, I can come back. We're not here next week, but the following week, I can talk more a little bit about what's actually in the ordinance, and so that everybody has the right information.
Okay.
But in summary, so we had a police task force created about 3 years now, about 2.5, 3 years. That police task force made several recommendations, over 20 recommendations. Many of those recommendations have already been implemented. Some things we were already doing. That task force dissolved in about a year and a half ago. One of the recommendations they had made was to create a civilian review board.
Yeah.
And that recommendation was brought before the city council in March of 2023. At that point, there was some discussion, and there was a pause on the discussion. And then during that time, nothing happened until, obviously, last week, it was brought back to the council. So the ordinance that was passed, and there is, right as of now, there is no police task force. So that's been done for almost a year and a half.
Okay.
The ordinance that was passed creates a civilian review board. And the civilian review board, in essence, they will advise the police chief a recommendation as to what they believe should happen in certain disciplinary matters.
Okay.
So the disciplinary matters that they will review are disciplinary matters that we currently send to our outside investigators. So these are matters that include such things as use of force, civil rights violations, any allegation of great magnitude, including any type of conduct that would warrant 3 days or more discipline. So they're only going to review, once the investigation is done, they're going to review that case and make a recommendation to me about what they think should happen.
Okay.
They are not looking at cases of, somebody comes in and says the officer's rude, or, the officer forgot to do something. Those stay internal. Those will stay inside. They will just be provided a report saying, these were the cases that came through the department throughout the year that you did not see because it didn't meet the criteria, and these were the resolve of it. And those are usually your minor cases, your where it's not fitting in a category that fits the outside investigator looking at.
Okay.
So the Civilian Review Board is an advisory board. They will make a recommendation to me, and then the final recommendation about discipline is still me. So the police chief makes the determination on discipline. I don't make that decision in a vacuum. So my recommendation has to be approved by, first, our legal department to ensure that it's lawful and ensure that there's not case law or something that would prohibit me making that decision. And second, it also has to be approved by the city manager, who is the ultimate say. So the Civilian Review Board will just provide a recommendation. The Civilian Review Board does not have subpoena power. They are not an investigative entity. And there's some criteria of how the board operates. So it's truly here's the recommendation, then the police chief makes their decision. So the other thing I wanted to mention quickly is also the way that people will get on the Civilian Review Board to be part of that group.
Yeah.
So the city has boards and commissions, and they will advertise to the community if you're interested. So in this case, the same process would happen. One, here's an advertisement. Are you interested in it? Two, once we get enough people, there is a selection committee that's now been formed. The selection committee is also included in the ordinance. The selection committee is myself, a member of the police union, so a police union board member or whoever they give to me, a police officer, and then 3 members of the prior task force. We are then making that decision of who are the people that we want to sit on this board. We pass our recommendation on to the city council. The city council has ultimate say. So there's a lot of steps here that need to take place before this is actually in motion and in play. But I wanted to make sure that people understood what it is truly. And like I said, not next week because we're not here, but the following week, I will go over a little bit more in detail about the ordinance, what's the criteria for people to be selected, what their authority, outside of making recommendations on discipline, there's also some things that they can do in terms of making suggestions to the department about things that the community wants to see. So there's some other duties too. But I wanted to make sure that people had that right information.
How many people are going to be on the task force?
So per ordinance,
or the
it's
review board, I'm sorry.
9. Yeah, so
9.
up to 9. And let me give you the specifics next when we talk
okay.
next. So
Sure, and then one other thing. So will the outside investigators or whoever you have sent this information to in the past, will they still be a part of it too?
yeah, so it's 2 separate things. There's an ordinance now that has been created by the city council about 3 years ago that says certain types of investigations need to go to our outside investigator.
Yeah.
They're still there. They're just the investigative authority. So it's
Yeah.
the investigative authority, and then it's the advisory group, which is a civilian review board. But ultimately, the police chief makes the decision. And
Yeah.
one of the things with that too is officers have the right, per their contracts, if they are not in agreement with their discipline, they can grieve their discipline. It's not just termination cases that result in arbitration hearings. Sometimes it's not. There are cases where officers are getting suspension days and they choose to grieve it. And at some point, people have to sit in a room with attorneys and the arbitrator, and you have to testify. And so, as the police chief, I've done that. That's part of the duties of a police chief. So it's a responsibility that it's a lot, and you don't want what's an everyday person who doesn't have the training, knowledge, experience, and to make a recommendation for discipline for officers. The
Right.
final say. There's nothing wrong with people giving their opinions or what they think, but ultimately, when you're the person that makes that final decision and then has to answer for that final decision,
Yep.
it's a little bit different. I can tell you because I do it.
Right.
So, why or how I'm making my decisions is based on the number of cases I've been involved with disciplinary matters, my training, my knowledge, but also understanding what police officers do, right? So understanding why they're doing some of the things that they're doing. Not every time that somebody says that an officer is doing something wrong, they're not. It may appear that way, but they are actually doing what they can within the boundaries of the law. So it's understanding that part too. So that's what it is, but I wanted to make sure, because I know there's going to be a lot of conversation, and I want to make sure that people have, this is actually what's happening.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for the explanation.
You're welcome.
Then we have a couple of guests here, and
Yes,
that we want to
we
get
do.
to. Make sure these officers, you lean into the mics a little bit if you can grab that.
They're very excited to lean into the mics.
Yeah, bring that closer to you.
Okay, so
Want to make sure you're heard.
I wanted to, last week we were talking about traffic, and so I asked them if they would be willing to come on the show and talk a little bit about what they do. So our traffic unit is very, very busy. And I'll just give you a couple stats real quick. So This is just the traffic unit from 2023. Okay, so there's 5 officers in the traffic unit, correct? 4. At 1.5, right?
Correct.
Okay. But this was 4 officers last year. They made over 2,000 stops, vehicle stops. And they wrote over 3,000 citations, and just that group alone did 40 DUIs. And that's just that small group. That's not the entire rest of the department. So their every day is everything from traffic enforcement to investigating hit and runs to providing education to the community. So they're very, very busy. So I wanted them to come on and talk a little bit about what happens when, there's a traffic crash, especially if it ends up being a fatal traffic crash. What are the steps that are taken? How long does that take? So people can understand, why we may necessarily not put information out quickly to the public. So with that, why don't you guys introduce yourself first? Tell you a little bit about who you are, how long you've been here.
I'm Detective John Cox. I've been here for about 19 and a half years. I've been in the traffic unit for about 7 years.
Detective Craig Tucker. I've been here just under 25 years. 19 of those years were spent in the drug unit, and I'm now currently a detective in the traffic unit.
Yes. So Craig was also the 2023 EPD Officer of the Year. So
congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He does great. Both of them do great work. And, for Craig to go from I was in the drug unit with Craig for the 6 years that I was there. So then to see him go from, you don't really see the drug officers because they're doing undercover stuff. And then all of a sudden now he's in this role where he's very visible, like out in the street, doing traffic stops. People see him. So, and he's done amazing. So it's just nice to see kind of a little bit of a transition. And no matter what he does, he obviously does a really great job. So,
Yeah, and a good job being an investigator. I don't think I've ever seen you before.
Thank you.
So you did a good job of staying behind the
he
scenes.
did a great
in the
job.
shadows.
Yes. Now he's front and center. He's on the radio show. This is the pinnacle of the career right here.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, and we'll start first with you, John. So what's your day-to-day look like? What do you normally do? Like, just give us a snippet into the traffic officer's day.
Day to day, we all have a hit and run caseload. Those get assigned to us on a weekly basis, right? 3 or 4 of those per week each. We also do a lot of selective enforcement. Elgin Police uses DDACT, which is data-driven approaches to crime and traffic safety. We try to spend a lot of our time in those areas because those areas have been identified as areas where there's a high propensity to have traffic crashes. So we spend time there. We set up a lot of directed patrols. Craig's very good at doing those from his using what he's learned in his time with the drug unit. We also work special events, court security, and we administer all the truck permits for the city.
So, for example, your traffic crashes. So, Craig, you get a hit and run that's assigned to you. So, what are some of the steps that you commonly take to investigate a hit and run?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, let me give a little bit of advice.
Yes.
If people are involved in an accident, obviously, number one, you're going to make sure that you're okay and make sure that everyone's okay. If people need ambulance, call for an ambulance, everything like that. But what I always suggest to people is you've determined everybody's okay, you're fine, write down the other plate of the vehicle. Get a description. Let's say it's a blue Chevy Caprice or something like that. Write that down. Even if you have a second, take a picture of the vehicle because unfortunately, there are a lot of crashes that happen where, one car is going to leave and it turns into a hit and run. And our biggest thing coming, what you asked about is if we have a license plate, I'd say most of the time we're able to solve that crash. Mm-hmm. We're able to find, the offender that left the scene or at least find the car. But unfortunately, if we don't have a plate, sometimes it's really hard. I mean, yes, we'll rely on video. We'll pull video from businesses or from the city cameras. But if we don't have a license plate, sometimes it's real hard. So just remember, if you're involved in a crash, make sure you get that license plate because if someone does leave, we'll be able to solve it for you.
And that's being a good witness, right? So even if you have a license plate, they still have to, not necessarily the car who is registered to is the driver, but at least it gives them a starting point.
Yeah.
So being a good witness and taking a photo if you can. Now, let's say, so we have traffic crashes that you guys get called out on, right? So these are the more serious traffic crashes where there's significant injury or In worst case, someone is deceased. So talk a little bit about those cases. And I guess, John, if you want to start and talk a little bit about, traffic reconstruction. You guys are both reconstructionists, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so talk a little bit about that part and how difficult it is, one, for that class for you guys to go through, but then also what that does for the investigations that you guys end up looking at that are more severe.
As far as those classes are concerned, they're more difficult than any college course that I've ever taken. There's very few reconstructionists here in Illinois because of the difficulty of classes. And those probably take about a year to go through. I mean, not a year straight, but on and off, you're in class for about a year. And those are classes that you typically have to go out of town for. As far as when we do get called out onto a significant injury crash or a fatal crash, we'll run almost two parallel investigations. One, which is the reconstructionist job, and their job is to figure out what car caused the crash, who's at fault for that crash, whereas the other investigator will run the criminal investigations, such as a DUI, talk to witnesses, and such. When investigating a fatal crash, we can kind of go at it a few different ways. I mean, we can go at it based on cameras. If we have a camera that shows the crash or shows the car traveling leading up to the crash, we can typically obtain a speed off that fairly easily. It gets a little bit more complicated if we don't have a camera, but we still have some different options that we can use. A lot of cars have computers inside it's various computers that we can obtain data from that give us a little snippet of what happened 5-10 seconds before a crash. And then we can also use what we've learned through our education as far as actual physically reconstructing the crash. And as long as we have approach angles, meaning we know which direction the cars were going, departure angles, weights, and final rest positions, we'll be able to do mathematical equations and figure out what the speeds of all these cars.
What the classes teach you is, if you imagine it's a single 2-lane road and you come across two cars and both people are deceased and there's no witnesses, there's no cameras, it teaches you how to investigate that, reading the crush angle or the crush depths of the cars, the angles, reading the roads, the marks on the road and stuff like that. So that's really the hardest part.
That's very complicated, right?
Yeah,
I think it's not as simple as just they go out there, they make a determination, and then that's why it might take them a little bit of time, or us a little bit of time, to eventually put information out to the public, because they're still doing their work, and they're determining whether or not, hey, we're looking for this person, or we've determined that this is the person who's at fault. So, just hearing what they just said, crush angles, this, that, right?
I know, right?
It's very complicated, right? I mean, you can understand it at a higher level, but, if they said, here, Anna, take this and do a traffic reconstruct, I'd be like, what? I'm like, call one of these guys. I have no idea what they're talking about. So talk a little bit about how we use the drones, too, in our traffic reconstruction. Craig?
John?
I'll take that one. The drone, if we have a major crash, we'll call out the drone team, and they'll take sometimes 300, 400, 500 photos, aerial photos of our overall crash scene. And once we have that, and once we have our markings on the ground, we'll be able to put that into one of our computer-aided drawing systems, and we can take our measurements off that map. It's something that's a newer technology that most crash teams have moved towards. It just looks nicer. I guess it's better for somebody to understand rather than some of the older ways that we've done it. It's just it's easier to work with.
The amount of time that it takes to take 400 or 500 pictures from a drone.
That's what I was just thinking.
Oh, yes. It's compared to if you actually had to do it. So, like, when we all got hired, 20 plus years ago, someone's actually taking a camera, taking measurements. Then we used, what was the other machine called?
Total Station.
Total Station, where it's kind of like you'll see people, highway constructionists, when they're trying to measure distances, so that type of machine. And now we've evolved to drones, which has drastically improved the amount of time, the quality, the ability to do a further analysis. So it's very complicated. It's not, the traffic guys, they're doing traffic crashes, basic ones. They're doing traffic enforcement. They're doing special events. But then we have one crash or one fatal. It's hours and hours and hours, sometimes weeks or months of work. So that's where, when you had asked me last week about putting out every time there's a traffic crash and the roads are blocked, we're not going to do that unless there's a significant case or there's a significant reason why we're shutting the roads down. This morning, I know we shut down Randall because obviously the snow, the bridge is ice over. That's a common thing that happens. But there's probably a traffic crash somewhere happening too that we're not going to necessarily, it's just going to happen, it's done, and it's over with. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say this, as far as the classes go, like I said, you and I worked together undercover drug unit for 19 years. I mean, there's some very stressful moments. The most stressful event in my entire police career was the month I spent doing the Northwestern traffic reconstruction.
I can imagine.
It was terrifying. I was calling John every day going, I can't do this. This is really hard. And he talked me through it because there's nobody better than business than John.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, like that class I've heard is very, very hard.
Stressful. Very stressful.
When you actually have that knowledge, there's not that many reconstructionists, because I'm imagining a lot of the officers go there and say, yeah, maybe not today.
There were several people.
Right?
There were several people that left during that class.
Yeah.
And it's one of those classes where it's not a normal college class where you can go and I drifted off into thought for 5 minutes. You have to pay attention every second, because if you miss anything, you're lost.
Yep.
So
You can't catch back up.
Oh, you're studying 2-3 hours at home. You're coming in early studying. So
It's very, and that's
very
the thing
glad
too,
it's over.
That with traffic crashes, and I just, for the public and the community to know, right? Just hearing this 10, 15 minutes of just a snippet of what they do and how advanced it is. That's why sometimes we ask the community, just give us a little bit of time, right? Especially with traffic crashes, and more importantly to the family, right? So there's times where they have to make notifications to the family that a loved member is deceased, and the families and friends. And that's why I'm always very, I've said it many times. You would not want to be the person that sees a picture of a car that's demolished, but you can still see the license plate, or maybe that little sticker that is from your vacation that you took, hanging in the window, and realize that that's your loved one that's now deceased. So we don't post traffic crash pictures. We're not going to flag that it's a fatal until it gets to the point where that time has passed, where family and friends have been notified, and there's also a little bit of a grieving process, right? So as much as the community wants to know, sometimes there's a little bit of that back stuff that people forget that we are very mindful of, because if we do that, and I'm not going to allow that to happen, right? I'll take the heat of, why didn't you say it sooner, or why didn't you put this out? And my answer, I'll take that heat all day. That's fine, right? Because to protect the family, the friends, the officer's integrity of their investigation, because ultimately if there is someone that we want to charge, we want to make sure we have the best case. So, that's something that, it's good that the community hears what they do. And understands that it's not as simple as people may think.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Something I always think about, you may see us standing on a street corner sometime. Well, what are the cops doing on a street corner? And then you pull up and I stop you and say, well, you're not wearing your seatbelt. It seems very minor. Like, why are you spending your time doing this? Well, we see the other side of it. We see exactly what you saw.
Yep.
What you just said. We see the crushed cars. We see people that are dead because they were on their cell phone, because they were not wearing their seatbelt, or because they were driving way too fast. So we see that other side, which is it's hard. It's not easy. We see the families coming to the scene, crying and seeing that they have a loved one that they just lost. So that's
the other side to this too. So I think they put a kind of a realistic, it's one thing when I'm saying it, okay, and I'm saying it and I'm saying it, it's like, but I'm saying it because I know what they're going through and what they're saying, and so it's also good that the community hears that.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple minutes. I want to ask, can I have tinted windows?
Well, it depends.
All right, can you
gets
explain
asked a lot. It gets talked about a lot.
Yes. So can you explain it for the community, so that they, just an easier way for the community members to know?
Sure. As far as a windshield, other than the top 6 inches of the windshield, the rest of it can't be tinted, meaning it has to let 100% of the light pass. Your front side windows need to let at least 35% or more of the light pass. Now, there's a 5% variance with that, so we're not going to write a ticket to somebody, say, at a 30%, but once we get windows at a 20% or an 8%, we use a piece of equipment called a tint meter. We'll actually slide it over your window, and it'll measure the amount of light that passes between the 2 points. And if that's falls under that threshold, then that's a violation.
So how do I know what 25, 30, 8% is? Like, what's a easier way for somebody to say my window is over 30%?
You know, if you can't tell who's in that car or who's driving that car, then that's good PC to make that stop.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like because we talk about this too, right? And that's the easier way to just say if the officer can't see who's inside the vehicle because it's the window tint is so dark, that's probable cause, right? And at that point, now if they can see through the window, more than likely they're not gonna stop the vehicle. So that's like a everyday answer where people can have some guidance, right?
Okay.
Tucker, can I drive with my cell phone? Can I be on my cell phone? Can I be texting? What can I be doing?
You cannot have your cell phone in your hand while you're driving. You can't be texting, you can't be on the phone, it cannot be in your hand. If you're stopped at a stoplight and it's a red light, you can't pick up your phone and look at the time. Technically, by the way the law is written, that's a violation.
So that's another misnomer that people think, well, I just have my phone in my hand. I'm not doing anything.
Right.
Okay, well, the officer doesn't know that, right? So
and they can see your phone in your hand, where on the other side of the coin, you have to be able to see the phone in their hand, right?
Yes.
I mean, because
yes.
I know a lot of people just hold it down, so they hope that you don't see the phone, you can't pull me over, right?
Yes, so if the officer sees your phone in your hand, regardless of whether or not you're texting or not, that's probable cause to stop the vehicle, right? So, but yes, you do see people and they're like down here like this.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the fact then is when you're like this and then the light turns green and everyone's honking, you've just flagged yourself. Because now people are like, okay, what are they doing?
Which happens all the time.
Right.
It's so simple to buy one of those little things that you just put right on your air vent and put your cell phone right there. I have one.
There you
I have
go.
one in both the police car and my personal vehicle. It's easy to do.
We're going to bring them back.
Okay.
And one day, Tucker's looking at me. I think we should do like these questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? Right? So maybe like, I'll have to talk to them about their schedules here and see but that's a good, like even those 2 questions, right? It gives a little clarity to the community about, okay, I get it now, right? So, and it's easy to understand. So if you start reading somebody the traffic, the IVC, per the law, statute, blah, 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 people will be like, what? 25 what? 30 what? Just tell me what, like give me a simple way. So, and these guys do that. And the education is also very important to us in terms of letting the community know what they can and can't do. So, all right, well, we are out of time. Thank you guys for coming on. Appreciate what you do every day. It's not an easy job. I appreciate you both personally. Thank you. Any last things you guys want to say? Hi to anyone or anything like that?
Hi, John.
Hi, Paul.
There you go. Okay, well, thank you guys. And I will be back in, I guess, 2 weeks then. So I know you're on vacation. So
2 weeks from today, we'll
2
have
weeks from
Fridays with the
today. Yep.
Finest
So
again.
everyone have a great weekend.
Chief Anna Lalley and her guests today. Great information from John Cox and Craig Tucker from the Traffic Division. Coming up next is Steve Thorne. He's got his show, the Senior Community Spotlight Show, so keep it right here on this Friday. It is WRMN, AM 1410, and on YouTube at WRMN Radio on YouTube.
Celebrating 70 years of serving the Fox River Valley, WRMN AM 1410 and 96.7 FM is proud to inform and entertain you